I'm Clay Mitchell.
And I'm Patrick Gonzalez.
And today, Patrick and I have a very special guest. He's Michael Sakata, President and CEO of the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association. I had to read that, Michael, because I would mess it up if I did it from memory. We're going to talk about Maryland's infrastructure for transportation, the problems it's facing, the solutions to those problems, and how to fund the solutions for those problems. So, Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for both having me. It's wonderful to be here. I love, obviously, rich history in both of you guys. So thank you. Absolutely. It's an honor.
Now, Michael, tell us a little bit about your organization. Does it do? Who do you represent? And what do you do to further the agenda for making Maryland's infrastructure better?
Thank you. So as you mentioned, it is a mouthful. Absolutely, Clay. But I'm the president and CEO of the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association. I would say the tip of the spear, if you will. I lead an organization with a rich history of contractors, producers, transportation professionals that built everything. Okay. More than 200 member companies, workforce of more than 30,000. We're the backbone of Maryland's transportation infrastructure. I would say we're the driving force behind building and maintaining roads, bridges, highways, airports, transit systems that keep Maryland moving. My goal here and mission, not let down my board, but more importantly, is to ensure that our industry kind of meets today's challenges. Safety concern, public safety, infrastructure spending is definitely foremost of those issues.
Anybody that drives around Maryland knows, you don't even have to have a study about it, but everybody knows the bridges and roads in this state have slowly declined into a state where it's affecting people. Patrick, the Gonzalez organization just did a poll. Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, where over 90%, maybe 95% of Marylanders support doing work to improve the infrastructure in Maryland. That includes mass transit, the roads, and the bridges, and everything.
You are correct, Mr. Mitchell. 95% of Maryland voters think funding transportation infrastructure is important. Over 60, 2 in 3 think it's very important. And while that should not be surprising per se, because we all have to get from A to B, what it demonstrates to me anyway is a clear audience, a clear universe, Marylanders, that we've already got their attention. Now let's try to figure out some ways to solve the issues that Mike is dealing with and others in the industry.
Now, Mike, you have to know, where in the state are the most critical areas and problems that need immediate attention?
I don't think you got to look too far. Roads and bridges. Roads specifically, 49%. As we speak, 49% of Maryland roads are in poor or mediocre condition. And that's not just mentioned public safety concern. It's that costs drivers money, right? The wear and tear, the evaluation, the potholes, the alignments, all those things. And Trip reported on it about $842 per driver. And I think Mr. Gonzalez, wonderful poll. I appreciate that. All his, and thank you. I mean, what the information we received from this poll, by the way, invaluable. And I know we'll talk about funding mechanisms later, but they tell us a powerful story, right? I mean, it confirms that Marylanders are tired of sitting in gridlock that gets worse by the day. And, it confirms that Marylanders are tired of paying for damages, wear and tear. They $842 per driver caused by the crumbling road. it confirms that Marylanders are tired of missing time with their families and loved ones. You look at the demographics. I mean, it cuts across everybody. Absolutely. And I think that, as we'll get to it later, poll shows that Marylanders are tired of the status quo and that they are willing to pay for more solutions.
And it's not just the tax dollar cost for the materials and the labor, say, to build the roads. It's also, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure there's countless hours of lost productivity that could be put to work in people's enterprises to further business. Sitting in traffic is wasted time. And it's just gotten worse. When I first started driving to Baltimore 30 years ago, it wasn't that bad. But the last 10 years, it's terrible. It's just been terrible. What do you see as the main problem for the legislature or policymakers to finally do something about this instead of kicking the can down the road?
Yeah, it's about balance, I would say. Making sure that everything is taken care of. I think you look at the funds now, and I'm not saying that we're wrong in funding all types of infrastructure projects, but we got to really think about moving people, right? Not by mode, but really moving people to and from their obviously from their destinations. And I think that the math right now, it's and the constituents it doesn't align, right? You look at the folks who are out there on the roads every day. A lot of them don't have the luxury of remote work and flex scheduling. Our first responders, nurses, teachers, home builders, our service economy workers, they're the ones that bearing a brunt of the inaction, and they're the ones demanding we step it up. I mean, Clay, you're on the Eastern Shore, right?
Correct.
Your father, obviously, when he was Speaker of the House, provided Governor Schaefer the money in the budget to replace the failing bridges over there, right? We've seen how the new Kent Narrows Bridge, the Vienna Bridge, all built in the 80s, 90s, transformed the Eastern Shore, while saving countless lives. We've seen, how stepped up improvements to Maryland Route 404, Dover Bridge, US Route 113, when they're literally becoming death traps for motorists. They invested in new grade separated interchange at US 301 and 304. And to me, the public safety, it was a public safety concern then, and it's becoming that now. As I mentioned, 49% of Maryland roads are in poor, mediocre condition. I think it can't be understated, and this poll says this. We are the precipice of a crisis once again, and times demand action. And I don't think that we need to wait any further for people to get hurt or more business to leave our state.
And Clay, if I could just
Sure, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, no, and Mike frames it perfectly. We live in a world where everything seems to be a competition, and particularly in politics. That's what drives campaigns way too often, in my humble opinion. This is not a competition between one form of transportation. We are all in this together. However, as Mike so aptly pointed out, we've got to be logical about it. We've got to be realistic. This has to be decided ultimately by reason, not by feelings, not by emotion. And I think we're a long way toward that goal, and we've got more to go. But I just would encourage everyone to think in terms of, and I don't want to sound Pollyannish or silly, we're all in this together, people. Let's approach it that way. So that's my only thought.
I don't think anybody would consider Patrick, you Pollyannish or silly. But to his point, right? We are. Is it bad strategy to focus on that mode of transportation? No, absolutely not. And I think projects like the Red Line, Purple Line, as well as existing transit properties like Metro Rail, MARC, Baltimore Metro Light Rail, are viable options, and will be more viable options if we have better road infrastructure. Let me give you an example, Clay. is that, we're in Maryland. We're not District of Columbia. We have very few walk-up transit stations for our commuters to ride Shady Grove, Branch Avenue, Owings Mill, Hunt Valley. They have the ability to reach them. If traffic gridlock is so intense that a commuter is running 20 minutes late for their next meeting, then guess what? They aren't going to fall behind any further by transitioning from their car seat to the train seat. Okay. They will stay in their cars and pay the parking premium. That's just a lost transit rider and another car on the road. And the opposite is also true. We don't have a successful and highly attractive transit network if our roads become more clogged and less functional. Take two modes and both modes to work synergistically. And I think the poll shows that Marylanders understand that. Better roads equal better transit.
Just to bring this up as an Eastern Shoreman, one of the arteries that connects us to the Western Shore, of course, one of the only arteries is the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, the dual span. Right now, there's being some rehabilitation done to the bridge, and I know you were just down there yesterday or the day before with some folks looking at the progress that's going on there. There's been a study to show the need for maybe a third span. The selected spot was where the existing bridges are. There could be other locations that are just as viable, but that's where the study said it should go. What are your thoughts if the bridge third span goes there, that be some sort of expressway with a third span that limits access on and off the road, so that people say want to get to Easton, Cambridge, Ocean City, Salisbury can just take that road and leave the old infrastructure with the older bridges the way it is? I think that will go a long way with helping Eastern Shore people accept a third span of the Bay Bridge. I just wanted to bring that up to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that will be done probably in a NEPA study. Currently, the bridge is it's an MDTA property, right? Meaning that it's told that there are the Chesapeake Bay it's getting redecked right now. I know that the project by CS Consulting, Kokosing, and McLean doing that wonderful work right there. I mean, so they're extending the life of that bridge, right? I believe this is opened in 52, right? This is this is 4.3 mile bridge at the time was the longest in the world, and it has to definitely be still one of the longest. But to me, you can't argue that there's come summertime, this thing gets backed up for miles, right? So I know they're in a NEPA 2 phase right now, kind of figuring a lot of that out. But I do think from the poll, it did talk about public-private partnerships. It talked about opportunities for that. Whether this is applicable for this, that's a question for kind of some of our MDTA folks. But back to your question, you asked whether they should look at having an express lane of some type, a dynamic toll lane, and then the new span, just general purpose lanes. That's definitely an opportunity, right, for Maryland, the toll authority to capture some of that revenue. I think it's tough when you look at an asset like that, where some folks may like that, people who are going to the beach that may pay an extra $1 or $2. But the problem is you have a lot of folks who live on the shore. I mean, like yourself, right?
Right.
And use that daily. So I think you have a lot of legislators on that end who will push back, and for rightfully so. I mean, at the end of the day, this is not just a luxury, as it is for a lot of those folks going to the beach. So I think, if anything has taught me, so I'm on the Transit Revenue and Infrastructure Needs Commission. Then the thing it's taught me is to kind of look at the state as in these assets as a system of systems, right? So not everybody's going to use that asset for the same reason as you and I would. And I think we got to look at that. So I think it's an opportunity, but I do think that there are also opportunities where we need to look at, hey, maybe residents and or anybody on shore for free, for a severely discounted rate. But I do think there are public concerns there. But this is I mean, obviously, hey, we're redecking this bridge. These bridges are not designed to last more than 60, 70 years.
Right.
Does that answer your question, Clay?
What's that? What's that?
Your question?
Yes, it did. I was going to say, you mentioned the word funding. You have to look to sources of funding for this. And I noticed from Patrick's poll, people want, of course, they want the Cadillac service, but everybody wants to pay Chevrolet price. As sources of funding, where do you see that coming from? I notice we have EVs out there that don't pay gasoline tax and the like, but where do you see the funding coming from? What do you think is politically possible?
Great question. I think so. We created a coalition, the Together Transportation Funding Coalition, and that's just that exact name, but .org. It houses a lot of the solutions, and those solutions are exactly what we asked in that poll. Obviously, gas tax, sales tax, VMT. The local taxing authority, regional taxing authority, encouraging P3s. I think at the end of the day, we need to look at the long-term solution. And is it P3s? Is it tolls? Is it a lot of these things kind of nibble around the edges? We need to really look at the local taxing authorities, or RTAs, and VMT at a long term. I don't think that you don't need to look too far. Look down to DC, where the gas tax hasn't been increased, has been raised since 1993. Okay, since that time, we've raised our gas tax, and a lot of states have raised their gas tax for multiple times. The last one was done in 2013 in Maryland, and I think that is due to a lot of inaction. But you can't. It's hard to ask states to change, move away from the gas tax, by the way, which has been the sole source or primary source of funding for the last 100 years for a lot of these state DOTs, to then adjust to some VMT without a adjustment of the formula to how they pay for the different types of assets. Because right now, I mean, at the federal level, there's formulas that go into the gas tax that they pay for the formula-based funding, to discretionary grants, to our transit at the federal level, all those things. So that conversation needs to happen almost at the same time as we either explore VMTs or MBUF, mileage-based user fee, at the local level. So a lot of thought has to go into it. And that's kind of what we probably will see in this next round of the commission. Is a VMT, is it 1 cent sales tax, which I believe it will add about $1 billion. And I think that we have to we need to. There is no question that there is a need for infrastructure spending and larger and more in investment. So the need is there, just got to pay for it. So if you're asking me to look at crystal ball, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I've been around legislature for quite some time, and I can tell you that I avoid predicting the actions of that. But I can say,
Clay.
Yes, Patrick.
Mike might look like a young fella, and God, I would give my eye tooth to look as young and youthful and handsome as he does. But he has been around a while. So when Mike Sakata speaks, I listen.
Patrick, I appreciate that. I think the poll, though, to close that thought, based on the attitudes of Marylanders, on the need for better, safer roads, we've seen it. The fact that the Transportation Commission's looking at these, I'm optimistic that something will happen.
Dude, I am too. And you know what it showed me, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but I'm going to pick on politicians right now, just real briefly. They sometimes think we're stupid, or they don't give us enough credit. And what this poll demonstrated to me, Mike, was that Maryland voters are very with it. Okay, they understand. Now they've got lives, so they're not like Clay and I, but they don't have time to be political junkies. But they get the drift, and they understand that nothing on this earth is free. And when you lay out sort of different options, they recognize the problem. And when you lay out certain different options, they are willing to consider it. And in the beginning, that's all you can ask for, I think. So, brother, I so have enjoyed the last several months working with you on this project. And I agree. I think the future is very bright.
Yeah. And Mike, before session starts, we'd like to invite you to come back on and talk to us about what your top legislative priorities are, and during session to see how that's going. And just shoot Patrick and I an email if something comes up. We'd like to have you come back on and discuss that.
I would love to. Absolutely.
Well, Mike, according to the clock on the wall, it's time to bring to close another episode of Gonzalez Mitchell. So, Mike, it's our tradition to say goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick. And Mike, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike.